So nobody responded. Well, as a preacher, you might say he's pretty much a failure there. He just barely got his family on board. But he didn't fail at what God asked him to do. Or you could look at a character, let's just say Abraham. And you say, what are you supposed to do? Well, I'm not sure. I'm supposed to leave my home and family and go someplace, and God's going to show me. And he did. And then along the way, he was hoping to have a lot of children, but he only got one that belonged to Sarah. And that was what he was hoping for out of all of that. And Moses comes along, and now he wasn't expecting anything particular, and yet he looks over and he sees a fire on this hillside or this mountain, and he thinks, wow, that's interesting. Bush isn't burning up. Better go check it out, because they didn't have flaming fire back then. It could just come out of rocks, and wasn't anything that scientifically could have been done. So as he goes to see that, God speaks to him. And he tells him about a plan that he has, and that probably sounded pretty good to Moses because he'd like to get Pharaoh out of the way, etc. He's had some past experience with him. And then God says, and it involves you. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And Moses backpedaled, I don't know if I can do that. You remember the story from the book of Exodus. And yet God still chose him and said, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go into Pharaoh. You're going to tell him to let my people go. I don't know if he realized it was going to cost him as much as it did. All that wandering in the desert for 40 years. That wasn't because Moses messed up. But Israel did, you see, and it cost Moses this whole process. But this is what God chose him to be, a leader of Israel. What are you supposed to be doing? David came along and he looks out of the battlefield. He's supposed to be taking food to his bigger brothers who were soldiers by that time, but David wasn't big enough to be. And he sees this giant out there, and the giant is cursing and swearing about God and calling down all kinds of things and laughing at Israel. And David's enraged that nobody's going out there against Goliath to do battle. And so he decides that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Really, David? And yet he did. And I'm still going to come back to that same question. Over and over today, I'm going to ask. I want you to be asking yourself, what am I supposed to be? Whether you go eat lunch today out somewhere, you go home, or wherever you're at, somewhere during that lunchtime, when you stop and you thank God for the food, ask Him, what am I supposed to be doing? Why did you make me this way? What am I supposed to be here for? And not lost in space, but actually in a direction where God wants me to be. I think our vision is grasped by the doors that open along the way in life. Opportunities that seem just to avail themselves. A lot of our college students some are in the Dominican Republic, and a bunch of them are on break because it's a break. And we just have a few here, and some of these are the young professional group here. Well, most of them, I guess, really are. And everybody else has vacated us today. But they're all pondering this, and they're wrestling with this. These guys here pretty much wrestled them, and they've got a job, and they know where they're headed. And some of you feel like, I know where I'm headed, but I want all of us still to stop and think, whether you're trying to decide what your career is or where you're at, what am I supposed to be doing along the way? Where do those windows and doors open? And what does God mean when the door does open up? I want you to stop and think about what your abilities are as these doors open up. But don't just analyze it by the physical surface, because David would have never stepped up against Goliath if that had been all it was. But then I want you to stop and imagine, what does God want me to do if He's behind me, pushing me through that door? Because sometimes I think He does. I think He expects us to get through the door, and sometimes I think He'll nudge us a little bit to get us through, because that's where He wants us to be. Moses was resistant about that and kept complaining. And finally, God got angry with him out of the whole process when you look at Exodus chapter 4, verse 14. What am I supposed to be doing? What opportunities are out there for me We'll get down to this passage here in Esther in just a second. But these doors that open up here and there along the way, I think sometimes we don't see them actually taking place. Wesley Autry, in 2007, January 3rd, walked down the steps just like he normally did to go into the subway at New York City. And as he was standing there waiting for the subway to come by, if you've ever been in the subway, you know they're down deep and you're up on the platform. And he looks up and the guy next to him starts convulsing. And he falls over into the trackway. And he looks up and here comes the subway. And the guy can't get himself up. He's just having this mental collapse. Wesley looks around, there's nobody to help him. Quickly he thinks, I can't lift the guy out of here in time. And he jumps in on top of the guy, presses him down against the railing, in between the railing, and lays his body and covers over him. And he's thinking along the way, I think there's enough space for both of us to be stacked up together and the subway to pass over. He's not sure. He's never done it before. And he saves the guy. And he shows up a few days later on David Letterman's show. And he says, I wasn't thinking I was a hero. I just had to do something. And I quickly thought, maybe this will work. Now, he didn't get up in that morning and think, well, I think I'll save a man today. But the opportunity, the door just flew open. And there it was. And he had just a moment to decide whether he was going to walk through or not. And he could have looked at it and said, you know, somebody ought to get him out. A big person ought to reach down there and help him out. But there weren't anybody that size. Back last year, let's see what the date was here, May 19th, not even a year ago, an off-duty Army captain, as he's walking along the way, sees his car bursting into flames and people inside. And he goes inside and he's carrying out one by one all of these people, bringing them to safety. And he's not thinking, what am I supposed to be doing during the day? But now he's doing something. He could have stood back and said, well, does anybody have a fire extinguisher? The whole time he's doing this, somebody's seeing what's going on, and they got the camera and they're videotaping it. And what's funny about it is he's got a Captain American t-shirt on while he's saving these people. Somehow, when he put that on in the morning, being an Army captain, he probably thought, you know, someday I may. And I think a lot of us, really, whether you have the t-shirts or not of these superheroes, in some way would like to be a superhero. But there are doors that open. And I just want you to see they open and close a lot in our life. Now let's look at one from the Bible, from the book of Esther. Esther was a unique individual. She was one of the most beautiful women around the area. And because of her beauty, she got picked to be added to the harem of this king in this area. Ruthless guy. Terrible. And so she gets put into this giant harem along with all these other people. Now there was something unique about her that all the other women didn't have. Besides her being the most beautiful woman, she was of Jewish origin. But nobody knew that except for her uncle, Mordecai, who worked in service with the king in the process. Now as the story builds up when you're looking through the book of Esther, there's a character who hates the Jewish people. His name is Naaman. That's strange, almost like Naaman. But anyway, help you remember it. This guy not only hates the Jews, but he plots and he works out a process that the king makes a law that's going to destroy the Jews unless somebody intercedes and changes it. And who could go before the king except beautiful Esther? But she's holding back. And rightfully so. Because she doesn't get to just walk in and say, hey, king, I got an idea today. Not allowed. Walking into the presence of the king, unless you are called into his presence, means death automatically, unless he looks your way and thinks, kind of like that smile or like that person, and he'll extend his scepter to you, and you've been granted life, and you can come in. Otherwise, he can look the other way and you're gone. And so the days are going by, and Esther's watching what's happening and all that's going on, and Mordecai's hearing what's happening, and Naaman's plot's coming to the point where it's about to happen. And Mordecai goes to his little niece, Esther, and he has a conversation with her. Now let's pick up with what's going on in chapter 4, verse 11. All of the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court of the king, who has not been called, but has they have but one law, and that's to be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out his golden scepter, that he may live. And Esther's telling this story. She says, "Yet I myself have not been called into the king for these 30 days." So they told Mordecai Esther's words. In verse 13, and Mordecai told them to answer Esther, "Do not think in your heart that you will escape the king's palace, escape in the king's palace any more than all of the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish." And then he asked this question. "Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Think about it, Esther. What does God want you to do? Why do you think all this came about? Why were you made so beautiful? Why were you put in the king's court? Why did it just happen to be? Why all this stuff except for this very moment? The door's open. And Mordecai's nudging. Think about it. And do we not, every one of us, pass through these special moments in our life? Are some of you maybe not even at that point right now? Or do you ever even stop and think about these doors that are opening and closing out there and what God is doing? There's no way on earth when I read this passage that I can conclude that this is not Esther's special moment. Nobody else can do this. She was made for this very moment. It was her time. It wasn't Mordecai's, it wasn't anybody else, it was hers. They're out there praying about all that, but it was still Esther's moment. Moses was called for a special moment. And when God began telling him about it, Moses was backing away. But Esther didn't. David comes down to a battlefield and sees what's going on. He sees Goliath out there. And it could have been just so easy. You know, think about this. 17-year-old guy who's carrying a sling, not a slingshot, but a real sling. It's a tool, it's a weapon, but not like what Goliath has. And he could have looked out and said, boy, some big soldier ought to take him on. But he doesn't look at it that way. He steps out there and says, how dare you do that to my God? I'll step out against you. He's not thinking about size. He's thinking, what does God want me to do? And if I walk through the door, he'll help me to finish the task. That's the point. I like the way Marshall Keeper used to define faith. When he says, if God says go jump through that brick wall, he says, it's my duty to start jumping. He says, it's God's duty to make the hole when I get there. And that's what David did. He just felt like that was his duty. Now let me ask you a question. Would it have been wrong for Esther not to go before the king? Think about it. Scripture really doesn't indicate or implies, though, and it would have been. But how many times when we look at a situation, a door opens up, I don't know if I'm supposed to, and phew, door's closed and we're gone. Later we think, oh, I guess I wasn't supposed to. past it. All right, so what am I supposed to do? 3 points. Think about them. Write them down. Maybe take a note about this. Number 1, be ready. When doors open, you got to be ready to walk through. I remember, bless my heart, I guess I should say, I took Grandma to the doctor's office. This was some years ago, and Grandma was slow. And when she was real slow, this was a slow day with the walker, she was especially slow. Now you walk in this doctor's office, and there's like 5, this is St. Louis, it's a big building. There's like 5 different elevators. You press the button, and it opens any one of them. You don't know which one. So you're standing here, and you look over to the right, and that door opens. Come on, Grandma. Come on, Grandma. We get over closer, it's gone. Okay, door's closed. Press it again. All right, let's hurry. So eventually, we said, I'm going to stand right here. Eventually, that door's going to open. We just pressed it. We waited. All the other doors open and closed. Eventually, that one finally opened. Okay, we're here. Come on, Grandma. We got in. And I say this just a bit of humor here, because when we press the button, or God does, and the door opens, it doesn't stay open forever. You're too slow. You can't get on. Point number 1, be ready to get on. When the door opens, be ready. I think sometimes we hesitate way too much. We look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I'm not made for this. I'm not experienced. I don't have the studies. We forget all about the God that's behind us. The same one that was behind David. The same one that was pushing Moses along the way. The same one that put Esther in her position. When the door opens, be ready to get on. You'll not ride anywhere if you don't. And a lot of times we don't know what's going to happen until it's just right there. There it is. Wesley Autry was just standing there ready to get on the subway. And all of a sudden, there it is. There's my moment. I better do something now. His door could have closed. He could have watched catastrophe happening in front of him. And he just couldn't stand it. He had to get on. John the Baptist, he was a lucky guy in one sense. Now, he had a rough life, but he knew from birth that God had chosen him. Moses just walking along the mountainside, and boom, out of nowhere he gets chosen. David's walking along and sees a battle going on. Boom, there's Goliath. But we've got to be ready. When the moment's there and the door opens, get on. Be ready. Samuel says it like this. As a little bitty boy, there he was in the presence of the high priest, and he's getting his life taken care of and all. And here's God calling him in the middle of the night. The high priest says, Samuel, you hear that again? That's God calling. Here's what you say. And so later on it happens again, the very same night. God speaks, and Samuel comes back and says, Speak, Lord, your servant's listening. I want you to be ready to listen when God calls. Too often, we think, I just got to be calling somebody else. Can't be me. Not me. I don't have, and we come up with all kinds of lists of things. Listen for God to call, and listen when He calls. What is He telling you to do? Too often we ignore God. Esther would have failed if she hadn't ignored God, speaking through her uncle to him. And I hear people talk to me sometimes. Dear fellow Christians, sometimes there's somebody out on the street, sometimes it's a radio mess. I don't know, I'm just going along and I hear something I saw. I think, I hear you, God. He's putting a challenge out there. And they keep coming and they keep coming. But you've got to listen, you see. Speak, Lord, your servant's ready to hear. And then I want you to be like Mary described in the book of Luke. When Angel Gabriel comes and talks to Mary, she's sitting there listening to this story about what God's planning to do with her life. She's a young little girl, not even married. She's proposed to be married, not even there yet. What do you mean about having a child, saving the world, and all that? I don't know, but she doesn't come up with all of that. May it done to me according to your will. Now you put those two together, and you be ready to listen, and then you be ready to say to God, may it be done to me according to your will. Number one, be ready. Number two, be strong and courageous. And don't doubt. That passage back in Joshua, favorite one of mine. As Joshua is hearing God's words, and he's just beside himself. Moses just died. Everything he'd been living for and doing was following Moses, and now he's gone. And Joshua comes to Moses and says, "You're up." Verse 5, God says, "No man will be able to stand against you or before you all the days of your life. For as I was with Moses, so I will be with you." Verse 6, "Be strong and of good courage. For to this people you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to our fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous." Stop being a wimpy Christian. That's what you are. Put some trust in God. Step out. Number 3, be active, not lazy. Jesus, in Matthew chapter 21, talks about a father has 2 sons. Goes to one son, he says, "Son, why don't you go out and do such and such?" And the son says, "No, I'm not going." Later he thinks about it. He's sad for what he said. He goes ahead and does it anyway. And then Jesus goes on and says, then the father went to the second son and said, "Son, why don't you go out and do that?" "Yes, sir, I will." And when the father left later on, the son thought about it. He said, "Nah, don't feel like it." And he didn't do it. And then Jesus asked the question, which one did the Father's will? God doesn't want any lazy people. Maybe you've been saying no. Time to say, well, I think it's time to do it. Then there's one other story told in Matthew 25 about people that have talent, abilities that are given to them the way we would parallel it today, although these were really sums of money. And the fellow that got the 1 talent, you remember this story probably, don't you now? He took it, he buried it in the ground. He didn't waste it, he didn't mess it up, it was still there. The master came back, dust off, cleaned it, here it is. And the master looked at him and said, "You wicked and lazy servant." Lazy, God says. I don't like lazy people. I was happy, now I can say this from my perspective. When I was 10 years old, it wasn't such a fun thing. Saturday mornings, when all the rest of the guys are sleeping in, about 6 o'clock, I was blessed enough to get to move into grandparents' house when Mom and Dad divorced, and Mom and 4 of his kids lived there. So I had the sunroom. And that's kind of like the family room and the playroom or whatever. I slept on the couch. Great spot. I had a fireplace. 6 o'clock, Grandpa would come in the morning, a.m. They have one of those on Saturdays. He'd come tickling my feet. He'd say, "Get up, boy. You going to sleep all day?" Now, you've been with me on different things in church and all. I am an early riser. It's Grandpa's fault. He couldn't stand to see people sleeping. Now, he'd been up for a couple hours already. He's waiting for daylight to come so we can get out there in the shed, get the tractor out, and do a few things. Only 3 acres, but we're going to do something to it. I learned something. Grandpa didn't like laziness. God doesn't either. You've been sleeping in? Get up. What am I supposed to do? I don't know what God's going to do. What door's going to fly open? You don't know. But number 1, be ready. Number 2, be strong and courageous. And number 3, then be active and not lazy and get at it. Vision. Where will you be a year from now? Kind of look down the road a bit and talk to God about it. And if your life isn't right with God this morning, then get it right. We sing a song to help you to think about where you're at and your soul's condition. You're battling against Satan. And if you're losing, it's time to get God on your side and get right with Him. If you're not a Christian,